accent.
You have to do the French accent for the whole sentence. Try it.
Oh, horns is horns, songs.
Genie is just being toxic as usual.
I'm being toxic?
If I take a shit on the floor, that's worse than me taking shit on the bathroom floor. It's still a
Hello and welcome to the jungle. I'm Ginny, joined with Medic, Broxah, and Cubby to talk about everything and anything League of Legends related in the LEC and LCS. We're going to be talking today about the upcoming roster changes in these leagues, Faker's Fury, but also, first of all, let's just have a look at the LEC playoffs.
First off,
I hope...
like and subscribe.
No, first off, let's...
Okay. Last week it took you guys
He's
ages
back,
to
everybody.
say it. This time we're getting it right at the top. If you don't like and subscribe, you're a bad person. That's not true. I can't say that. If you don't like and subscribe, I'll cry. I'll probably cry anyway. I'm very susceptible to emotional manipulation, I'm going to be honest.
You're gonna cry? Why would you cry anyway?
I mean, he cried after he saw the LEC
I watched
playoffs
Armageddon
last
last night. That's a sad film. Bruce Willis at the end sacrifices himself for the good of the world. Similar to how we're sending G2 to be sacrificed to MSI.
For the good of
Probably
EU.
not for the good of EU, but you know.
I mean, you're
I thought
sitting
that's what the
out-
second
True,
team was
yeah.
doing.
Well, we haven't
Sacrifice
sent
to
Mad.
help
We're
you.
not sending Mad
yeah,
Lions
yeah.
this time, so we can't have a team get knocked out in planes as our honorary sacrifice. You know.
Like 16 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Here's the
what,
thing with
48 seconds?
16:47. Okay. It picked up, and
47.
I understand why it picked up. Mad Lions lost in 16 minutes 47. Sure. You want to know the quickest game in the history of International League of Legends? T1 lost to IG in 16 minutes and 1 second. Right? Why don't we 1601 T1? Is it because they've won world championships since then? Maybe. Is it because Mad Lions always get knocked out
Multiple
early?
times?
They've only won once
Maybe.
since then, I think, right? Because they only won the first time last year. But anyway.
Imagine only winning once. Man.
Imagine winning, Broxah.
Broxah won a lot, okay?
Wait, why did you add my name to that?
Wow.
Okay. Alright, I see how this.
It's a hot
Shots
start.
fired. What a great way to start today. I mean, listen, we gotta keep it a little light because we're gonna be talking about the LEC playoffs. Because I am not gonna lie, I don't know if you saw Fnatic Vitality yesterday, Cubby. It was great.
Yeah, I was actually really tempted to kind of just, rewatch it before I hopped in here with
Why
you guys.
would you do
but
that to yourself?
It was all a blur. It was all a blur no matter what. And you know what the funny thing is? The two teams that we're sending to MSI this year, it was TL versus FlyQuest, and they played. And that was the most kills we've had in a best of 5 in LCS history by 40. They were north of 200. And that's exactly what happened in 4 games. It was the most kills in LEC history yet.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like I get the idea, and I have subscribed to the LEC is not playing the optimal style of League of Legends at the moment. I understand that. I agree with that. I think things were a little bit messy mechanically. Sometimes things were a bit all over the place. But Fnatic versus Vitality Game 4 yesterday was the most hype game I've watched since the 2019 Fnatic G2 regular season match, where Reckless ends up, we listen to the voice comes afterwards, and it's Reckless Hilly backdooring after G2 have just taken a Baron, and they're just like, please Hilly, please. Like, I had the same, it was such a good game. Like, and I know it was messy, and I know it was bloodthirsty, and I know people will come out and be like, oh, the macro was bad, they didn't play side lanes, they didn't do this. It's like, yeah, fuck it. It was a fun series to watch, and I had a whale of a time. So, sure, maybe at MSI things aren't going to look great, but I would much rather have teams that are willing to take the fight, and both these teams are very willing to take the fight, than teams that are just going to sit back and let the LCK and the LPL dictate terms to them the whole time.
I also think yesterday's fighting, the fighting on Monday, was a lot more exciting than what we saw in the first 2 best of 3s on Saturday. Because I was sitting backstage with Gulbo, and we were like, we are supposed to analyze this. And honestly, it was like, everybody played so poorly that I actually started getting really bored. But then the day after, we had the G2 BDS series with the lane swaps, which was really exciting and cool. And then we had the Fnatic Vitality, which was also crazy and chaotic with a lot of fighting. But at least it was exciting and close and awesome to watch. So I feel like, sure, macro doesn't really exist in the LEC right now, as long as G2 is not involved in lane swapping around, but at least we're getting some bangers, and we also got to remember it's entertainment at the end of the day.
Yeah. It was very entertaining. I mean, I saw a couple of people, specifically like Fnatic, people that were like part of the team or just behind backstage, and they were like posting screenshots of like their Apple Watches that is like, you're dangerously high in the heartbeat at the moment, like please take it easy. And I'm like, yeah, I can totally understand from like a team's perspective if you're sitting backstage and you're looking at what's going on, you're just like ripping your hair out, but you know, at least for the viewers it was a good time.
Well, it was fun as well because we had humanoids on the post-game lobby as well, and you know, I think it was you, Jeannie. You asked him, "How did you feel about this game?
Yeah.
Well, what was up with all the fighting?" And he's like, "Yeah, I just wanted to fight. I actually didn't care."
Yeah, he was like, I
At
took
least
it
he was
personally.
honest. Like,
Yeah.
and humanoid normally, as far as I know, is one of the main voices in mid and late game. And if he comes in with this bloodthirsty mindset, I mean, no wonder, you know, there was no macro or general rotations or whatever.
I love the fact that it was Nightshare on the same desk, right? And he was saying, oh yeah, well, we knew Vitality were going to be really bloodthirsty, so we said we wanted to play a little bit more measured, a little bit more calm, and we just wanted to, you know, play around the map a little bit better. And Human was like, no, I just decided to fight them, and we knew they'd take the fight, so we just kept going for the fights. And like sometimes you just need a series like that, right? Again, not the best League of Legends we ever watched, but probably the best series I've watched. I don't want to say that like LEC series. I think I can say this year. I think there have been some other good series, but I think I had the most fun watching that. And maybe that's because I haven't been on the show for a couple of weeks, so I was kind of jonesing for, you know, some good League of Legends, like something to have fun with. But I really enjoyed it. I'd much rather see this than like the slower, more methodical stuff that we have seen happening a little bit. And like this, it was such a nice juxtaposition as well to the G2 BDS series, which was much more about how they're playing the map and how they're trying to interact with each other's compositions.
Yeah,
I think that's an interesting mention because there were actually a lot of people who commented on the G2 BDS matchup saying that they thought both teams were playing so poorly and they were just randomly fighting at all times, because it was just one of those really interesting series where, you know, the macro and decision making that both teams made was at such a high level, and everything happened so quickly due to the lane swaps that naturally led to a lot of fighting, but it also led to a lot of viewers just thinking that both sides were literally trolling the entire time. And it's something we talked about in the analyst desk as well, that, you know, if only we had more time between games to actually explain everything in detail, maybe, you know, we could convey it in a better way. But I also think just having a game like that where, you know, it's such high skill decisions that you know, the majority can't even keep up is pretty exciting, because that's not something we have too often in the LEC.
Yeah, and then that's followed up by just a bar fight the next day, which is just what else could you ask for when it comes to playoffs?
Perfectly balanced.
I mean, I thought the G2 series was really fun. I mean, I'm not surprised that we had lane swaps that early. At least like when we're picking Sion and then we're opting into Lulu into double marksman bot, I'm like, well, how are we going to play around this, right? Well, might as well just use what Sion's best at and lane swap. And they pretty much there were 2 games with the same exact draft minus Sion for Zach, or Zach for Sion later on. And I think that BDS, looking back, would rather have committed for some of the turrets instead of like really trying to kill their tempo, trying to get the right lanes, because G2 really put on a clinic of like, hey, if we maybe sack a wave on the Sion, like when the wave's even, we're going to have him base when our bot lane base is across the map, and we can dictate lane assignments. Like there was a deploy they had where they even walked down mid and waited for BDS to show in game 1, and then they picked their lanes from there. Like, and that was really cool to see. And at least for me, the champs that G2 had, I know they were actually down in gold for a big chunk in that game, but it did not matter because you have Aurelion Soul, and everyone got to see, even in game 1, the game where BDS probably managed to swaps the best, how filthy that champion is later on. And that the reason why everyone is playing it around the world, and we'll talk later about why he's not on the MSI patch notes for whatever godforsaken reason. We're going to have to see this dragon play at the Year of the Dragon. But it was really fun to watch, like G2 actually. I know they talked about trying things and talked about their mid game, but it was really cool to see them bring that out for a series.
Medic wanted to say something, but I think
did you really
got-
just drag
got
in
a little
these
of
in this economy? I can't believe you would have done that, Jenny.
in this,
In this
economy for free. Yeah, I did just. I did just.
Yeah,
say dragon bees.
I really enjoyed watching the lane swaps. I think it's an interesting change in the meta. That obviously NIP, FPX, there was a lane swap in, I think, game 4 of their series as well. Might not be in game 4, but it's been a long time since lane swaps were meta. 2016, if I recall correctly, was when the last time we really saw them like regularly. And then Riot changed, top lane towers, tankier, and you can't take turrets as quickly, and everything became a little bit harder. It kind of felt like Riot put their foot down and said, this isn't what we see in solo queue, therefore this can't be what we see in professional play, which is something the Riot have done, right? They like solo queue to be as much, at least a mirror of what you see in professional play, because then you can go out and be like, oh, I'm doing what Faker would do, I'm doing what Adam would do, I'm doing, what VTO would do, or whatever. But the thing that really hit me about it was BDS. I don't think a single one of their players was playing competitively, at least at a top tier level in 2016. Whereas for G2, 4 of their 5 were. Only Yike wasn't. So it's to see how well they coped with it was pretty impressive for me. But I'm not surprised that even if they were able to get the early leads, they then struggled to actually enact it later on in the game because they just don't have as much practice with it. And that's why I like to see these meta developments and these changes. And I really hope actually we don't see this squashed the same way that we have lane swapping in the past.
I agree. Yeah.
What I think was cool after the series was that we actually had people from BDS going out giving praise to Laprov and just saying that this guy was the hero that literally took completely control of the team throughout each game and just shot called how they were going to be able to handle the lane swaps. I think that's something from the outside point of view that would be cool to have more insight into what the communication is actually like in teams, because it's just another example of us only knowing like 20% of the story. All we saw is that they were making moves and they knew it was coming, and then it's just this one guy single-handedly trying to match G2's macro by getting everybody on the same page. I thought that was really impressive. And when it comes to nerfing lane swaps back in the day, I would like to think it wasn't only because it wasn't played in solo queue. Lane swaps was probably the most boring time I've ever had playing League personally. Some people really enjoyed it. I know a lot of coaches did because it's like almost a game of like high-level chess. But I just have memories of my top laner. Well, top lane basically is the worst of all in lane swap, because how it worked back then is they pick a tank, like Cyan or whatever, and then they help the jungler clearing basically the entire jungle on both sides, and they get no farm at any point. They just get 0 CS, 0 gold, 0 XP, nothing. It was actually miserable, and then it removes the creativity from the jungle role as well, because if both teams are doing the same thing and you're just farming with your top laner, well, good luck ganking anybody. So I hope they will do something so it doesn't show up again soon, because I think just as a one-time thing, it's cool to see, and it changes things up, keeps it refreshing. But I don't want that to come back, for good.
I mean, I don't think that it should be like an option, and like I think the biggest issue back then was that the turrets on each side lane were the same, whereas Riot then changed turrets where it was harder to break the the top lane turret if you had multiple people in the lane early on. And for me, I mean, I agree with you. It shouldn't ever be like, hey, this is just the optimal strategy. Because I don't think it is super entertaining to watch, but if it is an option, I think that's where it's fun. Like, if it's good enough where you can opt into, like, hey, we are going to play this lane where we get less value out of hitting the turret, and we're going to give you a better lane for that as the other team. But because of the draft we have, this is better for us in this game. I think that's fun. And that series did end up being really fun because this is something that we haven't seen in a long time before. And one of the things I was talking about, too, is the fact that in the lane swaps, as you kind of described, Broxah, things can get so scripted and the map is so heavily split and seesawed that mid actually becomes really uninteractive. And if you're Aurelion Sol in that scenario, that's the exact scenario you want mid lane too, which is like just more reason that G2 took it. I was really impressed with like why G2 took it like halfway into the drafts. Like Aatrox and the Scion, that matchup sucks. Like why would you take that matchup, right? Go play the 1v2. That's like I'd rather play that than playing Scion and the Aatrox. That's unplayable. You get every Q charge canceled. It's
yeah, I think it is that little bit of inventiveness that I miss at times. I think having it in every game like it was in 2016, I agree with Broxah. Like I don't want that. It does get a bit boring.
Yeah.
But at the moment, it feels that League is actually relatively scripted. It's okay. Well, we trade grubs for first Drake. Maybe we trade second grubs for second Drake. Maybe each of us just takes a grub and then we fight at Drake. It's like who sets up a 5v5 and how does your team play 5v5 is the only differences. It's like, oh, do we want to play poke? Don't see that many pick comps at the moment, although you see a couple maybe that finds a pick before a 5v5 fight at Drake, right? A lot of it is based around how do you play into the neutral. I can't remember the last time I saw like an effective 1-3-1 regularly, right? Maybe a little bit in the LCK and the LPL, but most of the time it's, oh, we have a split pusher that applies pressure and then we TP them down because there's a dragon that we're going to fight over. Or maybe we give the Drake so that our split pusher can get an extra tower, right? Whereas I look back at League of yesteryear, and you had split pushes. Again, it was too ubiquitous at the time, but it was cool to see it every now and again. Even funnel meta, and I know funnel meta was an abomination. I agree it was an abomination. But if 1 in 10 games, someone could say, hey, we're actually going to funnel here, and you have to work out how to deal with it, that would be super interesting. If we saw more 1-3-1, like true split push comps. If we saw, Heimerdinger Jungle worked for, I think it was GGU or whatever, where they had Blitzcrank Heimer and then he pulled the red buff over the wall and they pushed through top lane. Gam had the Nocturne power level 6 strategy against, I want to say G2. Maybe it was it's Fnatic? Yeah, it was against you, wasn't it?
I was part of that. Our support was level 3.
He just ults him
and kills him.
Holding, and we're like, what?
Yeah,
is that bug,
I
guys?
feel like, even though you can say there is some, like, League is, there is some invention in League at the moment, something that we don't see that much is actually, like, true macro invention. It's very much how many people are showing on the map? Can we take a fight? Can we outnumber? And where do we take the fight? Well, we take it a Drake or a Baron or a neutral objective, right? And maybe you take a fight to force cooldowns before a neutral objective. Sure, you burn the enemy AD carry flash 2 minutes before Drake. Sweet, good job. But yeah, I just feel some of that inventiveness is lost. And I also I saw a lot of people saying G2 were just copying FPX and NIP, right? And I think when Europe thrived, at least, was when G2 was being inventive and when Fnatic were being inventive, 2018, 2019, when it wasn't just about following exactly what the LCK would do. G2 won MSI off a Pike top lane, with a multi-man flex. Doinb won Worlds off Nautilus mid, right? Like, obviously he had other things as well, but that sort of inventiveness really helped. Maybe I just loved League at that time because Europe were winning, right? Obviously, I'm going to be slightly nostalgic biased, but I really enjoyed watching people not just ascribe to, these are the steps, this is what we fight over, and this is how the game goes. And basically every game at the moment kind of feels like it has to follow that railroad that every game, every game is kind of the same. It's just who can team fight better.
Knowledge gap's always real,
Yeah. You're bringing up obviously the fact that we've also seen teams like NIP do these whole like lane swap. It's been a strategy that's been dormant, as you said it, for like 2016. So is it more like G2 wanting to avoid to play into some of these picks that were not necessarily great, or is it more like, oh, we've seen another team do it, we can bring it back again because it's worked for them, so it could work for us?
So I think there's two things that needs to be added here. One is the fact that in a lot of leagues, LEC especially, I feel like the entire game has been centered around team fighting. So if you can, take champions like Aurelion Sol and Jinx and you survive with your front-to-back team fighting comp, like even if you fall 3 or 4k gold behind, when 20 minutes comes around, when your AD carry has 3 core items, you're just going to automatically win the game. So I think in terms of that, like they somewhat baited BDS into picking Varus Ashe and then avoided the laning phase the entire game. And sure, they fell a little bit behind, but they automatically won the game later anyways because they outskilled them. But for the reason why I'm lane swapping, part part of what pushed them may have been the LPL series, but I read on Twitter, Yamato Cannon actually posted the other day that at the very start of the season, there was like different coaching or interviews with the coaches, and both him and Dylan Falco, G2's coach, had mentioned that they really wanted to bring back lane swaps. So, already months ago, it was on Dylan's mind that, maybe one day I can actually get a lane swap scenario. And I think them actually going for it is really cool. Also goes to show how great it is to have a series, because there's no way they would have taken the risk in a best of one. And then also doing it against a young team that doesn't have much experience against it was really smart. So I think everything just lined up perfectly for them to actually do it now.
Yeah. I think the Caps mention in like an interview afterwards, they did see NIP did it. And obviously I'm going to assume that G2 or other teams behind the scenes like have been practicing this or know that this is a possibility, but it can help when you do see a professional team pull this off, right? And if you're good about League, like if something works, it works, right? There's a copycat league. And that goes for anything being done professionally, right? Like it's not hard to digest, like, okay, these are the conditions and the reasons that we're pulling this off. And so if we get those, then here's how we do it ourselves, right? Like that goes for anything. There was a huge meta in American football this year where the Miami Dolphins had the best offense. Tyreek Hill is a track like champion, and he plays wide receiver. And they were doing this shift where they pretty much just gave him a running start. So he'd run across the offense and then just get a running start to go deep. And by week 3, every team in the NFL had their fastest player doing this because it was a new shift that was like just legal this year. And so, yeah, like if it works, it works. You can copy it, but at least something like that is kind of tough to implement overnight. So I'm sure that like if they're like, okay, like maybe we can talk about this more because another team did it. That's like very natural. Like everyone's like we were talking before the show about how we've been watching LPL and LCK playoffs, right? It's been fun. So yeah, if you see it, you talk about it. It's like, okay, maybe how can we incorporate it like for our own play? But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of with Brox in the sense that I don't know if it was just the copycat. I think that they kind of saw, hey, we can pull this off on our own. And
it also just makes sense in drafting terms, right? Like for so long, this double AD carry, double Halo Blades abomination of a bot lane has been so oppressive. It's like, okay, how do we get away from this? How do we just make sure we get to 15 minutes and we're not a whole tower behind and as far behind as you can be in that lane? I still think Halo Blades is an absolute diabolical rune. Like the fact that still exists and you can just do this double AD carry. Like I love playing Ashe and like styling on folks in the bot lane, but it's so disgusting that you can continue to do this.
Well, there was like one game.
Doing it on Ashe is one thing. People are doing it on the freaking Janna.
It's gross.
Janna
Halo Blade Zephyr.
That is the curse
like
tech.
It's W. Sorry.
She's the carry now.
There was the one game where it was like kind of close on gold, but I think Hans was up like 2.5 gold on everyone on the map. Like, yeah, like you're playing a tank top. Like, why wouldn't you take that trade ever?
I will say,
Jinx,
I think for G2, getting Hans out of the Ice Labrov matchup is probably the best strategy for them to make sure they can win games against BDS. I think Hans has been probably the biggest underperformer on G2 this split for me. Trying to think if I put him in my top 3 AD carries. I probably would, but only because you got Kazi Ice. Yeah, Kazi Ice and then Noah.
Yeah.
Not right now.
Noah.
Noah or Flaggett.
He'd be top 5, but I don't think he'd be a top 3. You're probably right, Broxah. Yeah, he's looked disappointing. And Ice had a very good series and has been playing very well generally. So trying to find a way to make sure that Hans Sommer doesn't have to deal with that lane, I think also makes sense, right? I do worry for Hans when it comes to MSI. I think Hans's hands are not. Hans is sans hands at the moment.
You mean
Sans,
okay?
Yeah,
sans,
but it doesn't work as well if I say it with a French accent.
You have to do maybe you do the French accent for the whole sentence. Okay, that sounds more like you're trying to say croissant. But that's a great point that you're bringing it up, though, because we're sending G2, obviously, because they've actually won winter. They're looking great in spring as well, but the championship point system, I know that's not the case so for LCS. So the LCS is like sending the top 2 currently performing teams. What are our thoughts and opinions about these whole championship points and winning winter, guaranteed MSI? You can literally sleep throughout all of spring. Not that G2 has done that, absolutely not. Don't want to take it away from them. Their regular season was maybe a little iffy, but in playoffs they've genuinely showed up and they brought some of the inventiveness and they're pushing teams to their limits. We all thought Fnatic G2 was going to be a great series, and then G2 really said, no, not today. So yeah, championship points here, Medic.
They suck.
I think that's such a great hard-hitting analysis. Let's move on.
The problem with championship points, and I mean, there's a few different aspects to this. Firstly, they're confusing. And so you spend like 5 minutes of every show making sure people understand how it works, and they still don't understand how it works. Like when I used to do the championship point check-ins.
Would you not just
I mean, obviously
blame
the viewers are
then?
idiots, right? But when it takes me more than 10 minutes to work it out, it must be quite complicated.
Whoa.
No, it's an awful system. The fact that like Vitality,
What happened to like
even if
and
they got
subscribe?
second place, couldn't have made it because championship points from winter had happened.
Yeah.
Like I think when we were in a 2-split format, they were kind of a tiny bit more forgivable because it's like, oh, over the course of the year, we'll use championships to qualify you for worlds, right? Because spring was always just, oh, top 2 teams go to MSI, cool. But now that we have winter in there, it's like, well, a team can do second place in winter and then end up like 3rd or 4th in spring and still somehow make it to MSI. It's like, imagine if MDK had made it to MSI. If BDS and Fnatic had like shit the bed a little bit and say, I know, Rogue and Giant X had done well, and or even Carmine Core, say Carmine Core had got second place and MDK had got 4th and MDK had gone. Like, it just feels like firstly, it's overly complicated. Secondly, it doesn't reward current performance, and especially with MSI patches not usually being massive meta shifts, or at least that's what they've said. They don't want to have a huge meta shift before they go into a patch, before they go into an international. It rewards teams for having been good like 4 patches ago. It feels like it is unnecessarily complicated when you could just qualify the best 2 teams. The issue is we have winter. And so you're like, oh, we want to give some reward for doing well in winter because there's no 3rd international tournament. So now we kind of just have to give a participation trophy to one of our teams. I hate them. I hate championship points so much. I think we should get rid of them. I think we should just qualify the top 2 teams from spring and winter. I'll give them a medal. I'll hand draw them a poster of their winning lineup. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Because
sure they would
lock-in,
love
you
that.
didn't qualify from lock-in, did you? When lock-in existed, Cubby. You just
No.
won. It was just
And
like, oh, cool, congratulations.
I agree with that because honestly, like winter, I think the fact that if you win winter, you're in for MSI is just dumb. Like I'd rather have championship points than that, and those are dumb too.
I still don't think it's as bad as it was back in the day. I think it was 2018 where
Oh yeah, that was
Thieves
diabolical.
Yes.
qualified to Worlds where they were like actually terrible, and that was because they had a lot of points from spring or whatever. Like I think they might even have been in our group, and we were just getting free W's.
So I agree with you, Broxah. But
Then why are you complaining? You got a free W.
Well, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it used to be
is
even worse.
It
So at
is
least we're
that.
taking
Like Mad
steps in the
Lions,
right direction.
was it last year, the year before, qualified without winning a single best of 5? They got to Worlds. They didn't win a single best of 5.
Yeah.
BDS can get to MSI without winning a single best of 5. If they come like they.
So
Actually, they can't now because
I'm not
Fnatic
saying
got
it's
through, but
good,
they
okay?
could have. They could have.
I'm saying it was worse, and it's at least better.
Yeah, but
and
if I take a shit
you
on the
said,
floor, that's that's worse than me taking shit on the
First of all,
bathroom
why
floor.
would you
It's
do
still
that?
a shit.
No, but
like
you
it's still
said,
it's
the problem is the format. Like winter has to matter in some way.
It doesn't.
Like what are you?
Fuck
what are you
winter.
Gonna do?
Like
Nobody is gonna
Then get
watch
rid of it.
winter
I
split
like-
if there's.
the more I think about the 3-split format,
But then you
yes,
go
and I
back to the
don't
old
think that was a
format.
problem. I think that the goal, it seemed, and I wasn't involved in any of these meetings. I don't have inside information, even though I've been working for Riot over that time. I'm a freelancer, just putting the proviso out there that no one thinks this is. Yeah, there's my disclaimer. Okay, clip the rest of this out of context. The problem was, it felt like they introduced winter because possibly there was a 3rd international tournament coming. Right, that was
Yeah.
one thing. It was like a test for other regions that hasn't materialized, but also because they were like, oh, We want to make every game more exciting, so we're going to introduce best of threes, we're going to introduce more best of fives. Every game's going to be more exciting, more people are going to watch, right? That's the logic. However,
and you get a game.
I'm not as excited for playoffs anymore. Like, when it was spring, it's like, oh, our top 6 teams go into playoffs. Sweet, they're going to go into best of fives. These matches are huge, right? Now, like, winter finals was fun and all, but I was nowhere near as excited for winter finals as I would have been for a spring finals in 2018 or a summer finals in 2019 or 18 or whatever, right? Because you have added so many exciting must-watch games, you have diluted the power of an exciting must-watch game. And I think you just get rid of winter, you go back to just spring, put in more best of fives, put in more best of threes. Make the regular season best of threes. Like, if teams want more games, give them the more games. Just why the fuck do we have this winter split and then this break when nothing happens?
I agree with you. Like, I actually...
That was my goal.
No.
You just wanted Broxah to agree. What if some random on right now just goes in the comment section and say, Medic, go fuck yourself. I'm excited.
How would that be
for
any
winter and
different
spring."
from a normal week of my life?
That's a good point, actually. Genie is just being toxic as usual.
I'm being toxic? What? That's a big statement.
It's always you. Anyways.
Someone's got to bring a little bit of personality, I guess.
Oh, wow. So, what I was going to say before all this happened is, I remember, like, I was in the studio for the winter final when G2 won. And it was a weird feeling, because like you said, normally we're so used to a final being so hype and exciting. And I actually didn't care. Like, it felt like any other, week, because, well, we were in the studio, and then it doesn't really matter if they win a split, because there's too many splits anyways. It's like, now, if G2 wins again, which they're expected to, they've already won 2 splits in like 3 months. Whereas before, it's like something you work towards for such a long time. And I think, like you said, just adding more best-ofs would be nice. But more importantly, maintaining the good part of the system, which is to get rid of the terrible teams early. I was about to say the teams that nobody cares about, but unfortunately, Carmen Corp is getting deleted every split. But, just get the bad teams out of the way and then have best of fives with the actual good teams. Because, like we saw this weekend, some of these matchups are going to be really, really exciting. And the more we can have, Vitality Fnatic or Fnatic G2 or, whatever teams it may be in best-ofs, I think that's how we really grow the league.
Is it, though, the fault, so to say, of the fault of the format? Or is it G2's fault? Because when we're looking at EU, it's like, oh yeah, G2, oh, they're playing Fnatic, whatever, yeah, it's gonna be really quick. Or G2, oh, they're playing BDS, oh, it's gonna be really quick. Like, is it really the format? Is it maybe just the fact that we have one team excelling? Would changing the format mean that other teams have an opportunity to step up? Because admittedly, yes, Vitality, Fnatic, BDS, I feel like in playoffs have done really well. Best of series are different than BO1s. But would that realistically really make an impact?
I mean, I think it could do, right? Like, if you give a team longer to prep and play together before they have to get into a playoffs format, I think it becomes a bit easier for them to find that synergy. I think as well, like, I look back at previous times when a team was dominant, like G2 2019, 2020. Fnatic were playing really well at the time as well, so obviously there was a challenge there, but G2 won 4 titles in a row, and I didn't feel the same degree of, oh, it's just G2 all the time, right? And maybe that's, as you say, maybe it's just G2 are so dominant right now and no other team seems to be able to touch them, but I wonder if that's because the other teams don't have as much time to build into their team, right? It's 2 months and you're making changes. And then 2 months and you're making changes. And every game is must win because it's cutthroat. Whereas in the past, you could have had, was it 18 games double round robin, right? So you had 18 games in which you could build up and you only needed to win, say, 8 of them to make it into playoffs. So you have 10 not throwaway games, but you have 10 games where you have this little bit of leeway to build into it. Alongside that, I was kind of skipping back behind your question, Ginny, because I had this point and I'm going to say it because that's kind of what podcasts are about. I realized how much we are devaluing an LEC championship. Let me give you a name and you tell me if you think they're a more decorated player in the LEC, okay? Who do you think is more decorated? Reckless or Broken Blade in the LEC?
Broken Blade.
Yep.
Yeah,
BB
it's BB at
has
this
5
point.
titles, and Reckless has 4. Wonder has 4 titles, BB has 5. Mickey has 8 titles now. And like, I'm not saying BB and Mickey aren't good players. I'm just saying like the value of a title, the value of a championship is much lower than it used to be. Like Yike is tied 8th for most LEC titles.
But it's also because, you know, whenever they win the Shield, which they do 3 times a year, that shouldn't count as a championship. I think that's the big mistake. It should only be when you win the trophy, which now is once a year, where before it was twice, you know, in the season finals. Then, you know, it will actually mean something again. I think that's
But then
the problem.
you devalue the rest of the year is the issue, right? In the current format. I'm agreeing with you. I think the trophy should be the big prize, right? That should be the championship.
Well, but if you look at like traditional sports, for example, you're kind of building up to that moment where somebody actually wins at the very end of the year. So I think if you create that kind of system, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because then, like, if the championship points was about you putting yourself in the best possible position going into season finals, and you know, and stuff, then I think each split would actually matter in a different way. Because like when I watched football growing up, whether somebody were 1st or 6th coming into playoffs had a huge impact on whether they could
I
win
agree
or not,
with
right?
you. I think Cubby, they tried in LCS for a while a combined
I was
like,
gonna bring
win
that
loss,
up.
didn't they? How did that
Yeah.
go?
It was 21, and that was the year the 100 Thieves ended up winning. And it ended up being interesting because there were 3 teams that were pretty competitive down the stretch, but there were only 3 teams because there were so many games. And of course, like that can happen in basketball. Like there's 82, but even if you're a bad team, like you are still playing for your future with draft picks. That's not the case in League. And so if you are a bad team, like it truly does suck. And a lot of those games end up
Actually, yeah, I
not
remember
mattering,
that.
but
There were lots of times when I tune in
Yeah.
and it would be like 2 and 15 versus 4 and whatever, right? Like, yeah, that was...
Well, it wasn't even that, too. It got to, like, you know, I think there were over 40 games because the summer was a 3-round round robin. It was a triple round robin. So you ended up having 45 games played by the end of the year. And that factored into your record. And I honestly, like, as much as I do love those formats for NBA, and, like, I still have reason to always root for my team, especially when the Bulls kind of suck. But it didn't work for LCS. But where I'm with you on this is the fact that the winter split was created because there was the rumored 3rd international tournament, and that's where it made sense. And now that that's not the case, it just kind of feels weird. And honestly, I'd rather have 2 splits that are longer, and you keep the same format that you have now, except maybe you just have, instead of best of 1s when you play every team, just have a best of 3, and then go into a bracket where it's more best of 5s. Like I feel like if you sacrifice a winter split for that, there's probably going to be no one that really complains about that format.
I hope so.
No, there will always
I'm
be
ready
someone on
to
Reddit
complain.
who complains.
I've got my
there we go. We don't even have to go to
broadcast hat on.
Reddit.
Okay, so
Let's
everything
go.
I've said up until now has been my own opinion and how I think competitively it would be a fun system to watch. However, do you know where most of our viewers come from for the LEC? Or at least a lot of our viewers come from. Have you heard of a man named Carmetto? And have you heard of a man named eBay? If I am selling sponsorships and I say, okay, we're going to do this longer format and we're going to have best of 3s for the regular season, we can only have 2 best of 3s a day. How much do you think the viewership goes down when KC aren't playing? Or MDK aren't playing? Ginny?
No. What if we do only KC against all teams as a BO3 and only MDK?
Maybe they
against
could pick
every
up a
single team as
win.
BO3, and we save the lead.
You know, it feels crazy we live in a world where these 2 teams are mentioned over G2
I know,
Fnatic,
but like
by the way, I'm just saying.
in terms of
Like,
viewership,
I
like
can't
G2
be used
Fnatic
to that.
obviously are there as well, right? But if I'm
Well, you could, but look in the studio. If KC is not playing, there's like, it's not even half full, man. There's nobody there.
Yeah, but then what does that say about the teams and how well they have done at building a brand and building a following? Can we
It says a
really blame the KC fans and the MDK fans? But they have been given something to care about. and they really care. Like, when we're talking about Common Core, we're not just talking about them supporting in the LEC. Like, they're going to the Rocket League event that's in Copenhagen. They're going to the Valorant events that are also here in Berlin. They went to Masters Madrid. I mean, when we had KC playing on the LEC, I think it was like week 3 or 4. Nobody was in the fucking studio because they all went to Madrid to go to support their team in Madrid for Valorant. Like, this team is like ride or die, and not just for the game particularly, but rather for the organization. And that's just because Kamito and Ibai have done such an incredible job at cultivating community. So
I mean, I agree with that. I think we can blame Common Core fans for other things, like the over aggressiveness at times in the studio and unwillingness to accept that perhaps someone saying something about your team isn't a personal attack. Right? Like, I've had enough Carmine Cole fans get mad at me because I said, oh, they played poorly, when it's like, well, they're just playing poorly, right? But I agree with the branding sentiment. I think the other thing is they're very localized, right? Like, Carmine Cole have built up a French fan base, MDK built up a Spanish fan base, and they've done that incredibly well. But, like, G2 is, I think, technically a German org, and they've always been, like, the European team. Fnatic, I think, is technically an English org, but no one watches League of Legends in England, so they're like...
Yeah, nobody in England gives a
so I think that's the
League.
big thing. And I think G2 tried to become Spanish with their AOL team. I think Fnatic tried a similar thing with Queso. But like, they haven't really been able to tap into those markets. So yeah, all credit to Carmine Core and MDK for doing that. And having the fan base be as passionate as they are is great.
It's...
If only Kameno could build a better roster, you know?
Hey, Yamato was the problem.
Give them time.
Yeah.
They're working on it. They're making changes, right? Like, they're making changes. There are going to be roster changes in general, because obviously now we hit the point where we're going into MSI. There is off-season. There have been a couple rumors. We'll dive into those. But before we talk about the roster changes, I do want to touch upon the match of the week, because obviously we have the finals coming up for the LEC, which obviously is a no-brainer, going to be the match of the week. But to what extent, who do we think is even going to be in the finals? And would we be happy with that final? I mean, G2 obviously, like, they're there again.
Is the finals a match of the week? Is the question I want to put out there. Because I think G2 beats both of these teams. I think G2 beats Fnatic and G2 beats
probably.
BDS. Unless BDS, like, I think I'd probably give it more to Fnatic over BDS against G2. I value Humanoid's ability to turn it on a little bit more. And Razork's ability to turn it on, actually. But I think Fnatic BDS is a more interesting series than G2 versus either of them.
It is. What does it mean for MSI for you guys?
If
pretty much, that's the match of the week for sure. Yeah.
Who we think is going to come out?
I think it's going to be a really interesting series, because it mostly comes down to how much Fnatic are going to level up through this week of scrims. I feel like Fnatic did beat Vitality, but
at their own game.
They were a better Baron deploy from Team Heretics away from not being in that series. Seriously.
I mean, I think the problem with Fnatic is that they've literally been carried to this point just by being really skilled individually and having good mechanics and, you know, being able to outplay in skirmishes. But now they're reaching the stages where it's going to be very, very hard for them to get away with that anymore. And like you said, they might as well have lost to Heretics. Honestly, you know, 1 or 2 of the wins against Vitality may as well have been losses too. And I think BDS, despite playing against a perma lane swapping G2, actually showed a lot of good stuff, both when it comes to individually matching G2, but also in terms of, you know, macro and just having really good team play. So for me, there's like 2 things to look at. One is, how good is Humanoid going to be? He completely stomped Vizio in many of the games against Vitality. It was not fun to be Vitality's mid lane. A part of it was Jun and Razork playing incredibly well around mid, but still. And then the other is just whether Fnatic actually starts playing macro, because their games are looking a little bit too much like solo queue to win a semi-final, I think.
So I was just researching if Nuke has played any Aurelion Soul recently, because I feel like it might just be which team picks Aurelion Soul wins that series.
Or ban it. You can just ban it and make sure that they don't touch it.
Yeah, I think I agree with Broxah. I think it's very dependent on whether Fnatic's hands are alive on the day. Like I think they can mechanically outplay BDS, although Ice has looked really good. Yeah, Ice had a really good series.
Yeah.
I will see. I don't think Fnatic would be given
Ice
the
Hunts?
same fights
That would be
as they were
interesting.
against Vitality.
Yeah, no. But I think as well, like, Ice Hunt Sama would be a really interesting matchup to see in terms of, like, that bot lane prio. But again, BDS Fnatic actually completely slipped my mind there. See, again, championship points. It completely slipped my mind. Winner of the series goes to MSI. They don't even have to fucking win. They just need to win the series and go up in the finals. And then they can sleep when they are up against G2.
Well,
Not necessarily that any team would do that, because everybody's like, I want to beat G2. But still, like, again, kind of slipped my mind. So thank you for reminding me, Cubby.
At least there will be one best of 5 win.
Yeah, that's where we're lucky.
That's
Because
an
if
improvement for
Vitality had beaten
everyone,
Fnatic,
yeah.
Progress.
if Vitality won against BDS but lost to G2, BDS would have gone to MSI without winning a single best of 5.
That
Yep.
You know, I
Well-
feel like if we're gonna stick with these points, that should be reformatted again for
Yeah,
next
the
year.
problem is we reformat them every
Yeah,
year. Like, it's like, hey guys, we're adding some more championship points
Well,
over here.
yeah.
Hey guys, we're doing...
Hey, listen. You gotta throw shit at a wall and see what sticks, okay? Didn't stick. Maybe it'll stick next year. Maybe it'll stick the year after that.
yeah.
Maybe it won't ever
The major
stick.
issue is regional gauntlet. I think the introduction of season finals got rid of the need for regional gauntlet at the end of the year, but like it used to be our qualifying metric for world's third and fourth seed, right? Whereas now we don't have it because season finals is your qualifying metric, which I like. I just dislike the fact that championship points. Oh, actually no, because champ points qualify you for season five. Oh my.
Yeah, that's your seeding.
Oh no, he's
Because
like,
like
going
Fnatic almost wasn't in the
Yeah.
tournament at all last year,
I just hate
which was like because they played so well in summer, that would have been a crime, you know.
You know who's not in tournament anymore? For now, up until next split.
K-Corp.
Yeah, I was gonna say Giants X and Cloud9, but fuck,
Oh.
you're just like below the belt. No, yeah, they also
I want the
got-
clicks, you know.
You want the clicks. Really, I respect it. No, they're out, but it also means, I mean, we know that Carbine Core didn't meet their own expectations. It's been said time and time again, and they said that they're going to be making changes, but changes are happening slowly but surely. And so far, we heard something come out of the Giant X camp here in LEC, and then we heard something from the Cloud9 camp in the LCS. So I think we start off with the LCS here, Cubby, in terms of the changes that are coming through, specifically focusing on that top lane. Surprised, actually, both of them are top lane. But top lane in LCS seems better.
I mean,
give you
it's
guys that.
actually like top lane right now is kind of crazy in LCS because we've had Licorice and Someday on the outside. Also, I do want to shout out the strongest top laner from our Challengers League, Surdy, who I think is very good. He would have been on EG's roster if EG would have still been in the league. And like he gets a lot of high praise behind the scenes. Like I know Blippo said that he believes he'd be a top half top laner in LCS, and he's very good at playing strong side and dictating, like consistently replicating his lane matchups and pulling his team to play with him. But yeah, with like Fudge being changed now, we're going to likely see a top lane carousel. Where now is Fudge going to end up on a team? Licorice and Someday, like these are two players that have a lot of history, and Licorice was fantastic. It kind of sucked to not have him in the league again because he played so well last year. But will he find a team? And so it's interesting that with all these options available, C9 have gone for we're going to get Reapers so that we have a coach/translator, and then we're going to go for Thanatos, who is a very talented player from the Lucid Polbay core of the DK plus or D plus Challengers roster, but that was a bit of a left fielder, and I'm sure that a lot of K-Corp fans are probably bummed that Thanatos isn't going to be with Bo, because that was the first rumor.
Yeah, K-Corp can't catch a break, can they? Yeah, Thanos also looked amazing when I watched him in challenges, and I know Chronicler has really been bigging him up. I'm wondering, as you say, where Fudge will go. Is Someday import still, or did he get... he's not, right?
No, he's a
I mean, there's so many
he's a
good
resident.
top laners in the LCS now. Like Dokla, Impact, Whippo, Rich looks okay. Like Sniper, like I don't even know where you go. I don't think Fudge gets in. I think Licorice gets subbed in somewhere. Maybe for Rich. And then does somebody get in?
I don't know.
Your top lane pool is actually cracked.
Yeah, I will say that Licorice, I heard like last night that he wasn't the most active in solo queue of late, so that might have dinged him with C9, and also I know that he was on C9 in the past. So maybe like I guess there was something where he didn't want to live in the team house at one point, and that was the change that C9 made originally with him. And I don't know what someday is. The funny thing is that in the offseason, there was a week where Surdy was sick, and both Licorice and Someday subbed in for him, and then they each pinged Surdy afterwards, like, you're really good on this team. Like, we weren't able to actually like pull this off, which was kind of funny. I don't think they were like 100% in practice, because obviously their split was off, but I'm curious if they can get their, play in shape, because these are players that have been really strong in our region historically. And it was weird having them on the outside, and it will be weirder having them and potentially more on the outside going into the next split if this continues.
Honestly, I think the EU teams may even need to consider picking up 1 or 2 NA top laners
Licorice
at this point.
is good.
Well, the thing is, Odoamne has already been rumored, if not even confirmed, to be out of Giant X. KC is going to make some changes if they're going to replace Capuchat, and there's going to be a need of 2 top laners. And historically looking back and also now, like, there's just a limit to how many good top laners there are in Europe. Generally, it hasn't really been the most stacked role throughout the years, and we see it internationally every year as well. Like, top lane is usually one of the main struggles, and there are some promising ERL players like the Antonio that could be considered, but I think at this point, if you want to aim at like actually going big, you could go for somebody proven like a Licorice or a Someday. Not too sold on Fudge right now, but I do hope he's going to get a chance to redeem himself.
Yeah.
Or you could go the route of just finding like a promising Korean, which is a gamble that may or may not work out, right? But the EU top lane pool, unfortunately, does look a little bit thin at the moment. Ragnar is another one from the ELs that could be considered.
Yeah, I wonder about Ragnar. Oh, Howling as well looked okay on BK Rog in the LFL. But yeah, top lane in LEC is just, it's always been a really weak role. And I actually wonder like how many of the top laners I would keep if Licorice was on the cards, right? Oscarinin, honestly, I would probably lose Oscarinin for a Licorice. Mirwin obviously is part of MDK, but that's like a friendship roster, so he does whatever they want him to do there. I'd probably lose Finn for Licorice. I'd probably lose Wonder for Licorice as well, and I'd lose Odo and Cabo. Adam is just so ingrained in BDS, I'd probably keep him around, but Photon is the only top laner in LEC that I think has really started to perform. BB as well. Sorry, BB obviously I think has had a really good split. His shot calling is really good. His laning is much better than it was a couple of years ago. So, I think BB's improved a ton. I think Photon looks really good. I don't think Oscarinin looks great. I think Adam looks okay unless he's not. If he's on a tank, I don't think he looks great. I think if he gets one of his carries, he's fine. But otherwise, I don't think he's amazing.
A lot to think about, but also realistically, is that going to happen, right? Like,
I mean, it depends what Licorice wants, right? If he wants to play and is willing to come over for what is probably less money, sure. But lots of people don't want to uproot their entire lives and move to a different continent for what could just be one split of play, right? Or could just be 3 weeks. That's another problem, right? Like, if I'm a player and I'm like, I want to come over, like, you join Carmine Court, you could play 9 games and then you're off again. Like,
yeah, but then also it's like you're here for only 3 weeks. You don't have to bring all your shit. You can just like stay
maybe
in a team house or an Airbnb for 3 weeks. And if you do well, you can be like, wow, can I stay for like next year? That I think, yeah, I'm looking forward to see like the changes that are being made. I think as well, like, again, I kind of want to go back to the fact that like Brox has already touched upon it. Rumors of Odo basically being benched, being off that roster, and it goes back to the point of like when it comes to esports teams and in general, like everybody wants to turn around so quickly, and there's continuously going to be change. And I feel like a lot of players, or at least what it comes across, is like you're playing because you need to perform. There is not just the pressure on your shoulders of the fact that you need to perform because your team wants to win and you don't want to disappoint the fans, but there's also feels there's a lot of pressure on you to perform and do well because you want to stay employed.
I think it's kind of brutal, right? Because every year it's so volatile, and you're always being judged off of your most recent games and not what you've achieved before. Because somebody like Odoamne, it's only 1.5 years ago that he was part of winning summer 2022 with Rogue, where he looked amazing, like one of the best top laners in the league. Then he went to Giant X, and since then it's gone a little downhill. But it's just a brutal situation to be in, because there's no way Odo Amne is a bad player. I think another example could be like Hansama. Hansama looked, I don't want to say terrible. I'm going to say he did not look particularly great when he played for Team Liquid. He had a rough time in North America. But then, when he joined G2, and all of a sudden he was in a different environment with different pieces around him. From, I think 5 games in, he was considered the best AD carry in Europe. My point is that I think a lot of it comes down to the environment you're in. But also your motivation and your mental state and whatnot. I can definitely imagine a player like Odoamne, who's been around for 10 years or whatever at this point, having a hard time pushing himself on a team that's just destined to be at the bottom, rather than actually playing to go to Worlds. Like, I know when I joined Fnatic in the first year, it's the only thing the veterans talked about, and it always surprised me, because I was just excited to play any game of the LEC, but so was Reckless. But they literally only cared about Worlds, and I didn't get it until I had actually played at Worlds. And then 2018 onwards, I was on the same page, because it's like, it feels like everything you do throughout the entire year, you do to make it to that tournament. And then, even if it doesn't go the way you want it to, like, just being part of it is so huge in so many ways. And just being on one of these doomed lineups and organizations is really tough. Also because I don't know exactly what Giant X's situation is like, but on most organizations, they are cutting down pretty heavily when it comes to not just player salaries, but also when it comes to budget and costs, meaning that there's less people who have a performance coach and people around them to support them and help getting players back on track. That's something that I've been, I don't know if exactly worried about, but disappointed in. That when I joined the league in 2017, that was the surge of performance coaches, and eventually, like, every single team had one, because it's so important. I mean, League is a very mental game, so if you're not in the right mental space, you're not going to perform. And now they're not really around as much anymore. And I think that's one thing that actually gives G2 a huge advantage. That, well, Genie, you and I talked about it at the studio. I think you even tweeted about it. You could see in the BDS G2 series. Just compare the snacks that they have backstage.
Oh, I did tweet about it. You versus the guy she tells you not to worry about.
With a box of grapes and carrots. And then G2 had like the craziest snacks of all. Like, there was anything you could imagine, from sweets to strawberries to sandwiches to whatever. Like, all these outside factors make such a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, it looked great. I would play for G2 just for the snacks. I remember you saying that it wasn't like that when you were playing. You're like, I quit too early.
No, but like, when I started, all we had were whatever snacks were at the studio. That usually meant if I wanted something, I could grab
Kit Kat.
Freaking know, a Snickers.
Yes, yeah. There's a lot of chocolate.
I don't even know if there was Kit Kat back then.
But one thing though that you wanted to talk about as well, Cubby, was particularly the Inspired interview in.
I was going to say, real quick, LCS fruit platter meta. There's a store by the studio, and like teams will go out and just get a fruit platter, and they eat it outside. Yeah. It's
that
actually
sounds really nice. Yeah,
it is kind of nice.
Here in Germany, you get fruit, and it's like literally in a box. You get it from the grocery store.
Madness.
You open it, and there's mold in it already.
When you pick the ones without mold in them.
Yeah, it looks like there isn't any, and then you open it, and like. It's like hiding in between all the other fucking blueberries, and it's so annoying. It tilts me. But anyway, we digress. Back to that Inspired interview that you wanted to talk about, Cubby.
Yeah, did you guys see this? Like, it got blown up pretty big. I gave like my 2 thoughts on it in Hotline League yesterday, because we had Core on the show too. So it was kind of funny to like hear his reaction. And I will say the one funny thing is that, Jan, when he got the mic after the win, he started trash talking Blippo and Inspired because they had big egos. And I will say that I think yawn. Like I got a chuckle out of that, but personally, I thought this got blown up a little bit out of proportion. I think the real issue for me is that yes, it was an emotional interview, but for me, it felt like the emotional crux of the interview was Jensen and not Inspired himself. Like a lot of the pattern was like Inspired was like, oh, like I didn't play well, like I could have played better. Oh, but like my mid was like vegan in this area, and like there was more emotion, like how his teammate was playing instead of him. And I feel like if you have the same exact interview and you flip the emotional aspect, where Inspired is more worried about his own play and like what he could have done, like I'm sure like he's a great player. He's probably kind of come to terms with that already by the time of the interview, like going through the tape, like okay, I have to do X, Y, and Z. He's been on bigger stages, but when the emotional crux is like your teammate and you're kind of airing things out like that, it did come off as definitely weird. I think it got blown like way out of proportion, but for me, that was the portion where it's like, okay, this is kind of weird.
I don't even think it got blown out of proportion. I think,
yeah.
Well, so to be fully transparent, I watched 3-4 minutes of the interview, and then I just closed the tab because I started getting really tilted, and I didn't want to finish.
Yeah,
but I think it's really pathetic losing a series, and the first thing you go out
you air dirty laundry
is flame the crap out of your teammates.
Yeah,
and I've had teammates who did something similar in the past, not to the same extent, but we lose an important match. I know 2019 Worlds especially, it was like really crazy in the Fnatic camp because we dropped out to FPX and there was drama, and a lot of people went out and said things in interviews. And one thing you got to keep in mind, and this is it in all sports, like most people will only look out for themselves. It's like, you just have to, like, the politics are part of it, and putting yourself on a pedestal and making you look better than your teammates is important, because we're all fighting for a very small amount of spots. Mm-hmm. But I think going out and just flaming a teammate, I can't even imagine ever coming to that point, because sure, maybe Inspired fully believes that it's Jensen's fault that they lost the series, and a lot of the things he said I also thought was fair and reasonable, but some of those things you just cannot go out and say in public. Yeah. Like if I was Jensen, I would feel so betrayed, and I have felt betrayed by these type of things before, because at least for me it's like it's just super unprofessional and it shouldn't be happening. It's like, I think all players should aspire to like just put everything onto the Rift and let your actions speak rather than words. And if there's any issues within the team, you solve them within the team, but not in public. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't know. I think he definitely crossed the line, and I actually felt really, really bad for Jensen, because I don't know. It's just, and then it also added on to the fire of, like you said, the Yawn interview, and people had already called out Weibo and Inspired because they were very cocky going into the final, and I think it just went too far. It went too far. I still feel bad for Jensen even now.
I mean, Cubby, you're kind of like saying that it may have been taken a little bit too far. Talking about things taken too far here, though, is also the interview that we had about the DDoS attacks on T1, particularly with Faker, where he mentioned it. I know a lot of, like, he then comes out with a statement and clarifies that it wasn't with malicious intent. But let's talk about that one particularly, because honestly, like, from a DDoS perspective, that's something that happens to teams in the LCK for like years and years and years and years. And you'd assume, or I assume at least, that there are alternate accounts that are hidden, that are available, that they can play on when this kind of shit goes down. It's not like 14 days of solo queue where you're just like, oh, I haven't touched the game in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But I think potentially maybe coming out and saying that in an interview, people say it, like he says it with the perception where he's aware that there are alternative accounts where they can play on, but people might not be aware of it. So they just take it out of context, clip it, ship it, put it on TikTok, get a couple of thousand views, and everybody's angry. Yeah,
I think it's a bit of a weird one, right? Because he was asked, apparently, I don't speak Korean, so all I can do is go through the translations, right? Asked apparently specifically about what was the struggle against Hanwha Life. He comes out and says, well, we've been getting DDoS, we're unable to play. I will say, if you like as a pro player, if you get given a Riot account and you play enough games on it, people are going to realize it's you again. So if the DDoS is happening through the League client, as it seems to be, we have like no specific information, but as it seems to be, they will their solo queue accounts will just get DDoSed again. And honestly, if I'm the guy DDoSing them, who gives a shit if I DDoS some random? Like, as long as if I DDoS 50 people and one of them's Faker, and that's my goal, I'm happy, right? Because I've managed to DDoS him. Then, like, 2 days later, he comes out with this statement that sounds very much like his mother wrote it. Like, no, guys, actually, what happened was serendipitously, we were actually able to play on our accounts. And it's like, well, how much of that is actually true? And how much of that is, oh, we need to walk this back a little bit because you're causing a bit of a stir internally? The big thing I'm wondering with the whole situation is it just people having fun? In which case, why would you DDoS someone just because you want your team to win? Because DDoSing is like a federal, like, it's a big crime in a lot of places. I'm not sure on the Korean law on it, but it's a big deal. Or is there some sort of gambling / betting / we don't want T1 to practice?
Yeah.
Because you always get good odds betting against T1 because all of the T1 fans bet for them. So, like, I think there's something more malicious behind this whole thing, and it's not just people DDoSing for the sake of it. I also think if it has been happening for 2 weeks and either T1 or neither T1 nor Riot have been able to work out a way to either fix the client to get rid of the IP issues, assuming that's the issue, or find a way for T1 to practice, because I've heard also it might be a T1's internet IP thing at their tower causing issues. It feels like they really dropped the ball on either side, depending on whatever side it is, to not find a way to be able to have them practice in some sort of regard.
Yeah, it is concerning, and I think, again, like, coming back to these, I think also interviews are, a lot of people forget the fact that they're always going to be a little emotional, especially after a loss. It's going to be even more emotional, and yes, there is PR training to an extent that goes into some players, not all players. Not every single player that you see is PR trained, and at the end of the day, they are also just human, and emotions do most of the times get the best of the average person, let alone when it's an important game, or let alone when you've just been on stage in front of thousands of your fans, and might not have necessarily gone the way. It doesn't excuse it, but again, I think there's a lot of underlying issues and a lot of other moving parts that people need to take into consideration when it comes to these things. I don't want to say like people should go and like back off. Like, again, he said what he said. It was his statement. It came out of his mouth. And again, like, when we're looking, the topic that we talked about earlier, when we're looking at Inspired, he said what he said. But yeah, to an extent, emotions play a very big part in esports.
I mean, the question that I saw that Faker got asked was directly about the fact that they weren't able to be practiced, right? So it's not like he was going out of his way.
I will say,
to talk about
originally,
this.
The question I saw before I saw that one was, how was the game? It was just a general question. So a lot of people interpret it as him deliberately making excuses rather than
going out of his way.
Being a question around that.
Yeah, because, like, I mean, for me, like, I'm a golf fan. I got the Masters this week. It's like our biggest tournament. Like, players are injured going into the tournament, and asking them, hey, what was your prep like, dealing with his injury? That's a big question. And if you're asked that, you got to expect them to answer honestly. And if you're asking Faker, like, hey, you guys haven't been able to practice normally, like, what's up? Like, yeah, I expect them to answer normally. Again, I feel like this got blown way out of proportion, and very much unlike the Inspired thing, where I feel like there was reason to blow that up. Like, that was a weird interview. This one, for me, it's like there was a list of like T1's other excuses, like 35 ping, blue side was OP. Stuff, right? Like, those are so like 10 times more loser excuses for me than this one, where it's like, I couldn't prep for 2 weeks. Like, and I mean, Faker kind of walked it back and said, hey, we were able to get some games in, which is great. And it does suck because, like, as Medic's bringing up, like, there is fault on both sides. Like, the fact that this is an issue in the Riot client and people can DDoS, T1 like this is crap, right? And that's a bad look for Riot. This is happening. There's also the side where T1 has all the resources in the world to try and figure out how to get the best team in the world to practice, and they can't do that. That doesn't look good either, right? Yeah. So, like, there are issues everywhere. It's a weird scenario, but I had no issue with how Faker answered his question. It was like, this is what's going on in his life, right? He's a competitor. Like, he's always been a big grinder, and everyone in T1, like, they stunt how they practice in order to play more games later on in the season to prep for these events. Like, they play less solo queue in the first half of the season. They play way more in the latter half. It's been very consistent with T1 always. So if you aren't able to do that, then yeah, like, that throws you off your game, right? Faker's been prepping with this for 10 years, and it's got to be a couple weird splits for him having an injury last summer and now this spring.
Yeah. Speaking of prepping, we have MSI coming up, and there have been a couple of there has been a patch note release. So I want to, if everyone can kind of maybe discuss the biggest changes that I know what it's going to be, but I want to give it to Medic because I feel like you're really passionate about how bot lane sucks.
I mean, bot lane definitely sucks. But you want the change that I'm most passionate about? You can't QSS Mordor anymore.
That's bullshit.
Dude, as a support, that sucks.
As an AD carry,
all of you are thinking, oh, we're going to play Mordekaiser top lane or even Mordekaiser jungle. He's going to come in and he's going to ult me. No. You're fools, okay? Think of Camille ult, right? Camille support, she'd ult you, she'd separate you from your team. Imagine Mordekaiser support. I don't give a shit if I die. I'm just going to go like Dawn Core or some tank item. I'm going to huddle up to you, and I'm going to press out on you in a team fight. And now my team has 2 carries, and your team only has 1. Good luck. Good luck winning the game. It's going to be fun for you.
I think the difference between the two is that when Camille enters your jungle, she's going to solo kill you and one-shot you.
It's team fights. I'll play Jinx Mord bot lane, right? We'll lane swap, we'll play Sion, and then we'll play Azir mid or Aurelion Sol mid. I don't care. 35 minutes into the game, all I have to do is ult the enemy AD carry and we win the fight. That's all I have to do.
If they're fed,
even if they're not fed,
I think my point was, can you drag him to that point without losing the game? Because you're going to have a really worthless support.
People thought Kalista support was worthless, Keria made it work. People thought Caitlyn support was worthless, Keria made it work. All I'm saying, Keria, is I deserve a little input on the skin when you win worlds with Mordekaiser support. Okay?
You mean MSI? Because it's got to be changed before
this is Riot. Who knows?
No way.
No, they're keeping this. It doesn't matter for top lane. Like, I don't think QSS makes that big of a difference facing Mordekaiser if you are a solo laner. It's just that if you are something like a Nautilus, a Tahm Kench, a Lulu support, or a marksman, yeah, it's really tough. Like, even a marksman though, like, you still have range, right? Like, if you're a support Nautilus, you get ulted by Mordekaiser, good luck. You're dead. QSS is your only defense.
That's true. I mean, there's also going to be changes to... there's a really lovely thing that they introduced earlier this year, and they're the grubs. I'm looking at this from a perspective of jungle here, Broxah, in terms of how that's going to change the dynamic of the game. Because Medic actually already touched upon it earlier today, where it's like, oh, we'll get the first grubs and we'll give up first Drake. Oh, we'll get the second grubs and we'll give up second Drake. But when you're looking at it from a jungler perspective, how is that going to change your pathing drastically?
Well, I definitely think them making a change is good, because it feels like before you always had to be very strategic so that you would be the one getting the objective, and now there's often just a trade. Obviously Dragon is better than Void Grubs generally, at least in pro play, probably also in solo queue, but it's like in solo queue, who cares? Like, as long as you get one, you're happy for the most part. I also saw Freak went out saying that they are undertuned and that they want to change the spawn timer to make it more valuable, and they're going to give them more damage, as well as giving more Void Mites to come out and help hitting the turrets, which I think is a step in the right direction, because at the end of the day, just having more strategy surrounding when you actually clear these neutral objectives, I think is a positive. And also making them feel more rewarding. Something that people expected when the Void Grubs were introduced was that if you cleared all 6 of them, if you had a strong side laning champion like a Fiora or Tryndamere or Yorick, the game would be over because they would just one-shot turrets. But then quickly people realized that it literally made no difference at all. It's like it maybe gave you 2 or 3 extra auto attacks maximum. So I think it's surely a step in the right direction, because I don't necessarily need them to be as powerful as dragons are, but just making them more rewarding in some way definitely is a big positive for
It
the
also
game,
opens up maybe different styles, right? I talked about how dominant dragon fighting is and like team fighting around neutrals is. If you have, it's like old Rift Herald, right? Or when you used to get the old top lane Rift Herald buff and it would just give you more pushing power onto the towers. That was like ages ago. But like it does give you abilities to split push a little bit more. And maybe with things like Baron getting stronger, with like Zeri being touched, maybe we'll see a little bit of a step away from like pure team fighting, although I think we'll probably still just be pure team fighting most of the time. I will say, Azeka has paid someone off, okay? Because like all of his champs are just hard buffed this patch, man. It's going to be DRX at Worlds.
Don't
all over
worry
again.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the thing I liked most about this season was the fact that grubs were introduced in the game. It did break the pace of if you drafted a strong early game team, it was, okay, we're going to take Drake by 5:30, then we're going to be able to clean up our camps and reset for Herald around 8 and bring support. Then we can take that, we can clean up our camps, then we can be back at Drake around 11. And it was like very scripted. And then the game kind of came down to, okay, can we deny 3rd and or 4th Drake and go from there? And then it was like mythic comps versus like how fast can I get my mythics, and then like can I beat that? Grubs being changed, like grubs being introduced just gave Riot a lever to try and break that. And I like that they're trying to play around with the timers of them at least being not synced up with Dragon. I'm curious how much of an impact this has, because I think that grubs are still undertuned, and unlike Drake, they're comp dependent or game dependent. Whereas I know random Drakes spawn, but there's no denying that getting a Soul and Elder is extremely valuable, especially grouped up. Whereas grubs are still good in this like unique little situation. So I'm glad that they're playing around with them. I think the thing I'm most curious about is what do they mean by desync timers? Like, are they going to spawn at 4:30? Are they going to spawn at 5:30?
Fuck around then, find out.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's going to be interesting. And I will also say that this meta of like taking 1 or 2 grubs and ignoring them, I also kind of find to be a problem, because it's not anything you can fight for. It's like jungle can take 1 grub and I think full clear twice and get 1 crab, and that gets you to 50 CS, and that's level 6. So it's really like I think that they actually have to play around with that too.
I wonder if having
they
them like
wanna
respawn
get you there
on a timer, like each one has an individual respawn timer, might be
Yeah.
interesting. Because then you could like, if someone takes the first one, you could
That
still
could
come
be.
back and take
I
4
like that.
eventually if you just play them. Yeah.
I like that a lot. That'd be really fascinating, actually, like moving
Oh my
forward.
God, you
I'd
guys
like
should,
that a
like-
lot.
Freak did it. We can do it too, right? I'm just gonna buff
We should
support.
get Freak.
right.
Hey guys, have you heard of
You gonna
Mordekaiser
retire?
support?
Hey.
It's getting buffs.
No, ain't
Fun
no
fact.
way.
Fun
Yeah.
fact, Medic. I pitched something to the game devs at LCS Finals about buffing support,
Oh,
and they wrote
nice.
it down.
Okay.
Not to brag.
I don't think support
that's
needs
why we got
buffs,
the
I'm gonna be
fucking
honest. but
Mordekaiser.
if you can get them in.
Please
No,
don't.
it's very niche, but it was a good idea. Yeah.
Bring those tiny little support creatures back to bot lane. That's all.
The-
That's chain them back to that bot
That's
lane
the
tower.
sound of a vein that
Sick
and
dies
tired
solo
of
every
running off.
game.
Play safe under tower, and then there's like 5 people diving you, and you're like, yeah, I'm just
Oh,
gonna
they
sit here and
meant
go for the tower. Oh, what's my
Nexus
team doing?
towers, Jenny. Nexus
Oh,
towers.
they're all. My team, they're all backing. Oh no, my mid laner just pushed his wave in. He's gonna get a plate, right? No, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
No play. Okay, sorry.
Oh,
I
that's so
just got a
true.
little bit.
I mean, I respect it. The idea, Medic, was that you can get assist gold if you give someone XP to level up off of
Oh,
a
interesting.
relic
Yeah,
block
because you
or
used to be
zone.
able to get it because it would give them a bit of
Yes.
health or something. Yeah, and then they got rid of that.
I love
Yes.
how Cubby's like throwing it out there so that when it actually happens, he can be like, I said
Yes.
it on the podcast like
Thank
3
you.
months ago.
Yes.
5 years ago. I said that. It was
Also,
my
Azir
idea. No,
nerfs,
but it's
thank
gonna
God.
be here.
I hope it's something like sizable because the fact you can play Grasp and
Yeah.
you know like Fleet or whatever Azir is dumb, or Halo Blades, or
Doesn't matter. Just pick
even
Aurelion
Ace.
Sol.
Like Asol,
I mean-
I'm sad isn't getting touched. I'm glad Azir's getting nerfed. I think he
Yeah.
skews the meta too heavily around him when he's picked.
Yeah, he blasts you and your team.
I do need to say, like, Azir doesn't look as strong now as he did. Like, he was taken away from pro play for a little bit. Now he's been enabled, and since he came back, Like in LEC, it's looking pretty bad, partly due to Aurelion Sol. In LPL, he loses pretty much every game in playoffs. It's only in LCK that it's actually working out, and it's pretty close to 50%.
Do you think he is worse because people were given time to work out other stuff? Because I wonder, like, because he was out of the meta, people had to play different champions, right? It wasn't just the handshake that we saw, Azir, Corki, Azir, Syndra, like, whatever, right? And because people played other champs, I think they saw other things that could work in the mid lane. Aurelion Sol being a good example, right? We didn't see much Aurelion Sol before the Azir bans. Azir, global disable. He's still got he's only got a 50% win rate, but he's still got a 55% presence on 14.6, or 81% presence, sorry, on 14.6.
I also think it's a different Azir than we saw in the past, though, because before, when you had an Azir on your team, like as a jungler, I knew that if the enemy was a control mage, I would have full mid prior the entire game. And he can still contest and trade pretty aggressively, but I think he's also very scaling oriented now, so it's slightly different and doesn't have that.
I mean, that's strange because he hasn't been
he's got like 3 good
nerfed,
keystones,
substantially since 13-24. So if you're saying like this year, he hasn't actually been changed that much. They took his base health regeneration down from 7 to 5. That's the one change they've made to him this year. They changed a couple of bugs as well, but
Mythics being removed though, like it made it so that you can go Nashers first, which was really big. And then people like started figuring out you can do like 2, 3, 4 good different keystone setups and builds with him. So he's become like this like almost Kaisa of mid lane, where regardless of what build you get, you can find a way to fight for prio. Or like you can be flexible, right? I still think he's such a problem champion. I mean, I tweeted about this, and I had more fun this split because Azir was disabled in NA. I didn't have it for Challengers League. I didn't have it for LCS. We played on 14.5 where Azir wasn't available, and the game actually got more fun for me. There were a lot of different matchups played, and it really did warp the game and how it was played.
Hey, we saw Azir in the LEC playoffs. It's not doing well either. I like seeing Aurelion Sol, Kappa. I really love that they keep bringing back the dragons. But it's going to be interesting. I think looking forward to MSI, looking forward to how this week is going to be playing out for the LEC in general is going to be a treat of its own. But that's it for us for this week. We're actually going to be back, though. We are going to be back. We are. Medic might know. Medic is going to be back. Why are we laughing? That's it. I was going to say we're done. We're done and dusted. We're done. It's over. We're going to be back next week, and we're actually going to have a special guest, so make sure that you like and subscribe. Medic had one job this entire episode, and it was to randomly scream like and subscribe. Too early.
Was this too early, malarkey?
I have a TikToker brain, Anyway, can't remember. I think you've one of the podcasts where you did it every 15 minutes, 20-ish.
Maybe next time
I'll do
great.
That. I was locked in. Maybe we'll see with the new special guest. Maybe it's gonna be their job next week. So be sure to like and subscribe and tune in for that. Also, if you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section below. We'll be more than happy to answer your community questions. We can't leak who the special guest is gonna be, but if you have any questions, just shoot them in the dark. Shoot. You might land your shot.
A special guest, right? Because it has a...
Okay. Oh my god. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Let's get out of here fast.